Good morning, friends. This is the 12th Sunday after Trinity, and the intent is self-dedication. Self-dedication. So we'll have to eventually ask ourselves, which is the self we're talking about? But this is self-dedication. And as usual, we look to the collect to get some sort of direction about what this means, and maybe a very strong hint about which is the self that's been referred to here. The collect reads, Almighty and everlasting God. We always set out who we are speaking to, who we wish to engage with. Always the first line of a prayer indicates where we're going. What entity do we think we're interacting with, and how do we desire to go about it? Almighty and everlasting God, grant that we may ever increase in faith, hope, and charity. Faith, hope, and charity. Now, the word for charity is love, but love is a very expansive word, and so we use this word charity. Sometimes you think charity is helping people in the street or whatever. So that's an act of love. You can think of it like that, but charity is a little wider. And now the next couple of lines, and that we may quickly attain that for which thou hast destined us. Thou hast destined us, that we may quickly attain that for which thou hast destined us. So there is a path for all of us, an individual path with which only we can walk. There's tasks that only we can do. And so this collect, this prayer, this aspiration is asking, can you help us find this path quickly that's been destined for us? We want to walk this path, and we want to do our bit in our community and on this planet. And then the collect goes on, that we may love the path which thou hast ordained. So now this is just not sort of reluctantly finding it and maybe sort of walking along occasionally, just a couple of days a week. No, we want to actually really engage with this, understand it in the first instance, but then the use of this word love, which is allow the power of God to come through us, and then transmit that feeling, which we call love, to everyone we engage with, everyone we meet. God's love comes through us, and we're the sort of transmitters. We're the people that multiply it, engage with it, and spread it around. So we, when we're in line with the destiny, open up the channels for that love to come through us. And then as we move through life hopefully becomes a little easier. Maybe it's a little bit rocky to begin with until we find where we're going. But then as we more and more engage with that flowing love, that feeling of power that comes from the Father, the will of the Father that directs the love coming through us, as we more and more fall in line with that, then things go much more smoothly for us. And then we close the prayer, through Christ our Lord. We always refer to Christ to pass things through. And so that sets up the thing we're talking about, the self-dedication. Now we think about which is the self we're talking about. Now, we've spoken before about the multiple, if you like, I'll use the word dimensions of us as people. So we've got a personality, we've got a soul, and we've got a spirit. This is quite a package, isn't it? So it's not just our body that we're dealing with. And as Christians, we have to learn about these things and learn what it means to be the self. The self in this instance you might think of as the soul, the thing that endures through all circumstances, and especially endures through death. And we in the Liberal Catholic Church are very comfortable with returning lives. And so that returning life is the soul, but the personality passes away as we move from one life to the other. So let's think about the self in this stage. There is a higher self, which is a little harder to understand, comprehend, and work with, but not the soul. I think we're much more familiar with that. So the epistle, which is St. Paul's writing to the Romans, which is Wendy read this morning. So St. Paul is taking Christianity all around the Mediterranean, into Turkey. Well, it wasn't called Turkey then, it was called all sorts of other things. But this is moving through the old parts of the Greek Empire, if you like, Alexander the Great. But Roman law is then laid on top of this. People are speaking a dialect of Greek. And St. Paul is writing to people. He's a great writer of letters. He says, we understand what Christ has done for us. You do the same when you're dealing with other people. He says Christ didn't just make up the stuff as he was going along. He was transmitting insights, love, inspiration from the Father. He says Jesus, when he was with us, Jesus the Christ, was always representing the Father to us. He doesn't say it in this particular text, but what he was saying was, we've got to wake up. He kept saying this. Everybody wake up to what he was saying. In the same way, absolutely following that example, do the same with the fellows that you interact with the men and women that you interact with. Transmit as much of that message as you can. You don't have to talk their ears off or anything like that. It doesn't necessarily say that in there either. But by the person you are, by the deeds that you do, by the way you conduct yourself, that's the way the love of God comes through. And then in the gospel, we get much more specific now. The gospel is a section from the Sermon on the Mount. You might recall the Sermon on the Mount covered a huge amount of material. And Jesus must have prepared for this in some way in order to pack all of this in. People were sitting down and he was talking to them. Some of the messages he gave to him were counterintuitive, they're rather strange. And some of these messages in this section of the Sermon on the Mount, similarly, are in the same light. And he starts off by waking everybody up. He says, some of you think that I've come here to destroy the law and to really tell you the prophets were speaking the truth. I've come here to tell you the exact opposite. Everything that I do is absolutely in the fulfillment of the law. So he's starting right from the very beginning. He is saying, I am on my path. I know what my destiny is, and I am on that path. And the Father speaks through me. And in that way, this path that's been ordained for me, destined for me, same references in the collect, then I'm going to tell you the insights that I want to share with you that will make your life meaningful. And everything in the law and the prophets that was foretold is the truth, and you must learn to work with it. So he wakes everybody up and he says, things won't finish in this cosmos until everything has been played through. He doesn't say these words, but we can see from other sources that he's saying, you might play around a little bit and forget what you're doing, and you might wander off and do something completely different. But until all of us in the same situation on this planet Earth, until all of us are in alignment with God's will, we're just going to keep on and on. So, welcome to the party, and try and learn as fast as you can so you don't slow everybody down. He doesn't say that either. But that's the implication of what this message means. And then Jesus goes on, in the Sermon on the Mount, goes on to talk more and more. He says, you've been taught. He doesn't use the word Old Testament, but I will. He says, you've taught in the Old Testament. They didn't think like that. New Testament hadn't been written yet when he's speaking. When you read those books, some of those books talk about you've got to take an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. I'm going to tell you the exact opposite. If someone does harm for you, just absorb it and don't react. He doesn't say what I'm going to say next either. There's very little in life that you've got control over. Lots of things happen to you for all sorts of reasons, but the one thing you do have control over is the way you react. And the way you react will lay out the future for you. The more and more you get control of that, the more and more you can somewhat control your future while you're in line with God's will. So he's saying, don't hate your enemies. Pray for them. Ask for good to be done to them. If someone does harm to you, go and just forget it or try and reconcile. Later on, not in this passage, but in a later passage in here, he says, if you're coming to give offerings to God, this can be prayers or just an intention, and you think, oh, I've just got to sort something out with a member of my family because I've got a rift between me and that person. And so you go and sort that out, and then with a full heart you make the offering. And then God's love can flow. The rift has been rectified. When we start our service, we start with a confession. It's a general confession. We all say the same words together. And then a blessing is given by the celebrant, me in this case, in this service. And that blessing straightens everything out in our personality and connects us through to the soul, such that the love of God can flow more readily. It unties all the knots, gets rid of all the kinks and all the problems. And that's why it's a blessing to be able to do that. It's a privilege for me to do it for my fellow men and women. But the power that flows through me flows through everyone else that is in the room and in the community out here, all around where I'm standing, and straightens these kinks out of the personality. And so what Jesus is saying is, look to be in alignment, be in alignment at all times. Align yourself with the soul. Align yourself with me through the Father. We here, 2,000 years later, we say we align ourselves with our soul and we look to the Christ within us. Christ is closer than breathing, as he says. He's closer than whatever it is that we think is the self. Because the self, in this case, is part of him, and that's part of us, but we differentiate ourselves. So that's a little bit easy to say quickly. If we unpack it, we gradually come to the understanding of that. And then this passage, which has been selected by our founding bishops, says something really interesting. Just concludes this part of the Sermon on the Mount. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. What does that mean? Well, it means that God continues to provide this structure of the connection through to the Christ within everybody, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. And the rain, when it falls, is like his love, and it flows through absolutely everybody. Can everybody take advantage of it? Yes. Should we be trying a little bit harder? Probably. Do you know people that don't even try at all? Yes, you probably do. But it's there. It's ready to be tapped into. And just as the line says, for he maketh the sun to rise on the evil, on the good, every day as the sun rises, it's like that. Every day there's God's love there, ready to be tapped into. And then he sendeth rain on the just and the unjust. What does rain do? Rain makes everything flourish, doesn't it? This idea of nurturing. The sun comes up, the rain, take advantage of it. Step onto the path that's your destiny and flourish. Absolutely flourish. There's every intention that you must flourish, not be miserable. No, that's the wrong idea completely. If you think being miserable is part of the plan, you've missed it out, or you've misunderstood it completely. So, self-dedication. How does all this get tied together? The self we're referring to here is the deeper self, the Christ within us, the soul. And we dedicate that every day when we wake up. It doesn't have to be very complicated. Your eyes are open, you're alive. Always good news, isn't it? when you wake up, when you're alive. Open your eyes and you say, I dedicate this day to Christ. I dedicate myself, with a capital S, my soul, to Christ. Personality gradually comes into alignment, but you're not going to do that overnight. But that's what you're dedicating every day. And allow the love immediately to start flowing through you. That's the special magic of Christianity. I ask you to think about these things during the week. Just take them on board, try them out. See if it works for you. See if it brings extra richness and understanding.